Hey, I'm JSB, and today I'm launching a new series of tier rankings. And I'm starting off with something that's not a particularly obvious candidate for a tier ranking. But I figured if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be me. So start with something I love, and that is the albums of Harry Chapin, the great singer-songwriter from Brooklyn, New York, who released 11 albums between 1972 and 1980, before, of course, his tragic death in 1981. So we only shared 13 months on this world because I was born in June of 1980 and I got into Harry pretty much a decade after he'd passed. So early 90s, I was in my pre-teens, but I wasn't your average pre-teen or your average teenager when those years came. I've never been average, strictly below. Hmm. Anyway, so I will just be counting those 11 albums for this particular episode. I won't be going back to Chapin music, which he recorded with his brothers in the 60s, or looking at The Last Protest Singer from the 80s, which was a posthumous release. Not looking at archival live releases or compilations or any of that, just the stuff released on major labels in his lifetime. I'll be shrinking myself down in a moment, and you'll be able to see not only the categories that I've selected for the tiers, but where I'm placing each of those albums in there. So let's do it. All right, so the categories are the top one, a JSB Certified Classic. You can probably guess this is the best of the best. Love It is the next category down, speaks for itself. Like It, also pretty damn good. Um, Maybe a bit more of a mixed bag. Close but no bananas. Yeah, that's a Harry specific category. I won't be using that again. This is for any albums that happen to be pretty weak, but have enough to still make them edge on worthwhile. And then finally, JSB, which is me, but also happens to stand for just so bad. Uh, Hopefully, there won't be too many things ending up in that category, but we shall see. So we will kick off with the debut album, of course, from 1972, Heads and Tails. And I'm going to be putting that into the Love It category because this is a very strong debut from Harry. Obviously, the centerpiece is Taxi, probably still Harry's signature song, even though he had a bigger hit later on, which we'll get to. But there's an awful lot more on this album than that one song that is worth your time. Uh, Produced by Jack Holtzman, of course, who signed Harry to his label Elektra Records. He got into a bit of a bidding war between Elektra and Clive Davis at Columbia Records, but ultimately Jack promised that he was going to be the place for Harry to be. And was it a better place to be? Yeah, it started off that way. Maybe it didn't quite end that way. But yeah, I mean, if you like Harry Story songs about transport, you've not only got Taxi, you've got Greyhound on this album, but there's some beautiful stuff as well. There's songs like Everybody's Lonely, Any Old Kind of Day, quite melancholy tunes, and Same Sad Singer that closes the album. I didn't like that one for quite a long time, but it snuck up on me, and now it sets me to weeping, baby. So a really strong debut, reached number 60 of the charts. Harry's albums didn't typically turn into massive sellers. Did eventually go gold, although it took just shy of 30 years to do that, so that gives you an indication. But he would follow that up later in the year with, of course, his second album, Sniper, and other love songs. And could he do two great albums in one year? Yes, he could. That's going straight into my Love It category as well. So here he's not with Jack Holtzman producing anymore. He was getting busy with other stuff on the label and was about to merge with Warner's, which was probably what caused trouble for Harry's career, to be honest. So it is instead produced by Fred Cooley, his manager, and he does a pretty good job. The song here that most people will know is A Better Place to Be, which is another signature Harry story song epic. Great version. There's a even better version that we'll come to a bit later. You also get Circle in its original format here. But I mean, the title track is a tour de force. Sunday Morning Sunshine became his second charting single, only reached 75, and the album itself didn't get any higher than 160, but it's well with your time. My favourite track from here is probably, if not the title track, And the Baby Never Cries, which is sublime. But not a weak track on here, and should have been bigger. Not just in sales, but actually in terms of size, because Harry desperately wanted this to be a double album and recorded enough material to do that. You can, if you're lucky, get a CD that has all of that extra material on it, and if you can track that down, I highly suggest you do. All right, moving on to Harry's third album, which was 1973's Short Stories. Not quite as strong as the previous two, so I'm going to put that in the like it category. This is the first of three that Harry recorded with Paul Leka as producer. Returned him to the top 40 of the singles chart with WORD, again, another all-time Chapin classic, and Mr. Tanner's to be found on here as well. A lot of other good songs. They Call It Easy, the title track's great, Song for Myself, and Changes. But there's a few things that don't quite meet the level that Harry had set for himself. Songman, I find just dirge-like, and the last tracks on the album, there's a lot of Lonely People Tonight and Old College Avenue have never really connected with me. So not quite as strong as the first two. Still a lot of good stuff on here. Uh, didn't go gold, although it did get back towards the sort of mid ranges of the charts at number 61. But speaking of charts, his next album, again produced by Paul Leka, would get all the way to number 4, and that is Verities and Balderdash, which is another in the love it category for me. Now, this one had its sales driven, of course, by his smash #1 single, Cats in the Cradle. But again, there's so much more to enjoy on this album than that one big song. I Want to Learn the Love Songs here, but there's some really great deep cuts. Shooting Stars, one of his most gorgeous songs. She Sings Songs Without Words, right up there as well. And you've got the original version of 30,000 Pounds of Bananas. Side 2, not quite as strong as side 1, but still some great stuff. Halfway to Heaven is fantastic. Ends on a bit of a bum note for me with Six String Orchestra, which is one of Harry's rare occasions where he gets into this uh, humorous side of things a little bit too deeply, and it's a funny song, but it's a funny song that's only funny the first 2 or 3 times you hear it, and after that, it just gets a bit irritating for me, anyway. Um, but yeah, another fantastic album. Um, what could go wrong? Well, he could release Portrait Gallery from 1975, and I'm being tough on this one, but it's going into my just so bad category. Um, to be fair, it starts off pretty well. Dreams Go By, good tune. Tangled Up Puppet is fantastic. It's another song based on a poem by his wife Sandy, as was Cats in the Cradle. Should have been a follow up to Cats in the Cradle in the singles charts, but I have no idea why it was not released as a single. Um, as a result, the album only made it to number 53, which is still pretty high by Harry's standards. After that, you've got Star Trooper, which is also great. But then the next few songs are all right. And then most of side 2, I still think of these in vinyl terms, even though I don't listen to vinyl anymore. Most of side 2 is poor. No other word for it. Tracks like Sandy and Dirt Gets Under the Fingernails. Stop singing these sad songs. Oh, that's so bad. And you've also got Bummer on there, which could have been another sniper, was probably intended to be. It just doesn't come off. It should work, but it didn't. And there's, well, I'm not going to quote the opening line for you, but if you know, you know. And it doesn't really recover from it, to my opinion. I know Harry didn't mean anything by it, but, you know, yeah, we'll just leave the where we are and move swiftly on. As we're moving from the opposite of the sublime to the ridiculous, going from one of Harry's worst albums to one of his very best. It is, of course, Greatest Stories Live. Um, now, Harry was kind of one of those artists who had a lot more success as a performer than a recording artist. His concerts were legendary, even if they didn't particularly drive album sales the way other artists did. Um, so a live album was inevitable, and he didn't botch it when he got the chance to do it. It's got 11 live versions of, well, actually 9 live versions of songs. There's 11 live songs on it, but only 9 of them are from his previous albums because his brothers are on board on the tour. You've got a song each from Tom and Steve. Saturday Morning from Tom, Let Time Go Lightly from Steve. Both are really nice, but they also show they don't quite have the magic spark that Harry's own songs had. And here we get great versions of many of the classics I mentioned already. Um, Dreams Go By, I Want to Learn a Love Song, Taxi, WOD, 30,000 Pounds of Bananas, Mr. Tanner, Better Place to Be, Circle. I mean, it's all just so good. And then it ends with 3 new studio tracks, which were actually hangovers from the Portrait Gallery album. And you might be thinking, well, if there was stuff left over from an album that you hate so much, they must really sink this one down, don't they? But they don't. They're really quite good. And all of them should have been on Portrait Gallery ahead of some things that weren't. So, in fact, my iTunes version of Portrait Gallery has those songs on it in place of Sandy and Bummer and Stop Singing These Sad Songs, and it makes it a much more pleasurable experience for me. But I'm only ranking the albums based on how they're actually released. So, yeah. So this would ultimately become Harry's biggest album. Again, relative terms here. Only reached number 48 as a chart peak, but did eventually go double platinum. And it was my entry point into Harry's albums. Found a pristine copy on vinyl, of course, when I was 11 years old, and I'd heard Cats in the Cradle and was curious. So picked it up and fell in love with them. It still ranks as the best entry point into his catalogue. If it's the only thing you've heard from Harry, I really, really encourage you to go back to some of these other albums I'm talking about. But if some reason you're new to Harry and are watching this video, it seems an odd thing to do, but you never know. Greatest Stories Live remains the place to start. But it wasn't the place he stopped in 1976 because he found time for another studio album, and that was On the Road to Kingdom Come. And another excellent, excellent album, which I have got in the Love It category. This was, well, I was going to say the first produced by his brother, Steve Chapin, but Steve actually co-produced Greatest Stories Live with Fred Cooley. But here he takes over the reins, and in my opinion, Steve should have just been Harry's producer right throughout his career because he knows Harry better than anybody else he ever worked with for obvious reasons, but not just from a personal level. He understands how to get Harry's songs to sound as good as they possibly can. And there's some great ones on here. Nothing very well known because following the success of Greatest Stories Live, this one kind of got a bit buried. Only reached number 87 and kind of left the charts very, very swiftly. But you've got Corey's Coming, another classic Harry story song. The title track's great and some interesting lyrics in it. The Parade Still Passing By, a tribute to Phil Oakes, which is beautiful. It's written shortly after Phil's suicide. And another great story song in The Mayor of Candlelight. Another beautiful song written with his wife Sandy, Caroline. That's gorgeous. Laugh Band is maybe a bit of a blip here. It would have fitted onto Portrait Gallery better than it does here. But aside from that, a great, great album. Could it get any better than that? Yes, yes, it could. Another Steve Chapin produced album was to follow 1977's Dance Band on the Titanic. And that is my second JSB Certified Harry Classic. Again, like Greatest Stories Live, a double album, and one of the few 70s double albums that really, really warranted it. Because there's one song here that I'm not mad about, which is Blues Man. That's kind of a bit of an awkward song again. Well-intentioned, but doesn't quite work for various reasons. But everything else is top quality, including my favorite Harry song of all time, which is Mercenaries. If you haven't heard that song, just go and listen to it. There's a great live version available on YouTube for you to check out. So you bookend the album with the title track and the most epic of Harry's epics. There only was one choice, which is 14 minutes long. Doesn't overstay its welcome whatsoever. Just a masterful work. Although there is the tinge of sadness in it that he kind of predicts his own untimely death in the song. But yeah, in between that, I mean, he's just got songs about relationships and the difficulties of keeping them together and people growing apart within them. There's a lot of that on this album. Songs like We Grew Up a Little Bit, My Old Lady, I Do It For You, Jane, all covering similar lyrical ground, but with enough variation to keep it interesting. Yeah, it's just a great album. Did slightly better in the charts, reached number 58, but again, no singles charted, and it didn't last long. But it lives on in my heart. All right. After that, the record company decided that they needed a name producer. So sadly, Steve Chapin was ousted in favour of Chuck Plotkin, who took over the reins for 1978's Living Room Suite. And I can only put that one in the like it category. It's not a bad album. Harry does say in the liner notes that it's less story based, but just as deeply felt, which is probably true. But there is a feeling to some of the tracks that they're a bit more lightweight than what we're used to from Harry. Like If You Want to Feel, for example, which was a single, I believe, and not a charting one. It's a very pleasant pop song, basically. It sounds good while it's on, but unlike most of Harry's songs, it doesn't stay with you afterwards particularly. But you do have some really good songs here. There's Poor Damn Fool, Why Do Little Girls, which is still relevant today as it was in 1978, of how girls are held back despite their obvious attributes, uh, while boys are given the best of everything and still somehow manage to fuck it up. My words, not Harry's. And Flowers Are Red is on here as well, which is a kind of well-remembered song from his later career without ever having been a hit, which is, again, a song about education that every teacher should listen to um, and take lessons from. But yeah, overall, it's it's all right, but it doesn't rank up with the better of his works. And nor, I'm afraid to say, does the following year's double live album, Legends of the Lost and Found, which was subtitled New Greatest Stories Live, because, well, a lot of it was new. We've got 16 tracks on here, 10 of which had never been released on a Chapin album before. Um, and of those 10, maybe 3 or 4 of them stand up really well. Old Folky does. The Day They Close the Factory Down certainly does. And Copper and We Were Three, pretty decent as well. A few other things that are okay, but generally, like Get On With It, Stranger with the Melodies, which some people love, that's fine. And Odd Job Man, the I just find they don't particularly work. Although I will say, in Odd Job Man's favour, it does have one of the greatest almost ending lines. The last line of the last verse, it almost justifies the song's existence. If you know, you know. Um, no production credit on this one, but I assume if anybody had it, it was Steve. But um, it pales in comparison to the albums where his name is officially credited as producer. And that one did pretty poorly. I didn't mention Living Room Suite made 133. Legends made, I think, 163 and was far and away the lowest seller of Harry's career. Um, but fortunately, he didn't end on that low, and he moved for one album only from Elektra Records to Boardwalk for Sequel in 1980, which is back up in my Love It category. And of course, the title track here is a sequel to his first hit, Taxi, and surprisingly enough, managed to get him back into the top 40 for the first time in 6 years and notched one place higher than Taxi had. Taxi made number 24, Sequel did 23. And the album also, like Dance Band on the Titanic, reached number 58, but had a bit of a longer chart life because of being attached to that single. But yet again, one single does not an album make, and in fact, Sequel might be one of the weaker things on here because you've got Story of a Life, another of Harry's absolute best songs, which was a single and almost charted, it bubbled under. I Miss America, which is a fascinating take on various aspects of American life at the turn of the decade as it was. And God Baby, You've Been Good for Me, Up on the Shelf, Northwest 222. A lot of songs here about his relationship with Sam. Um, and it seemed like they were in a pretty good place at this point in time, which makes it all the more tragic that his death was really just around the corner. And of course, you had 2 versions of Remember When the Music as well. One's kind of more jaunty, upbeat version, and then the melancholy version that ends the album and is just gorgeous. So here you've got Ron and Albert, Ron and Howard Albert on production, and they do as good a job as anybody has with Harry's work over the years. It was a great way to bow out if he had to do it at this point in time, which is tragic and remains tragic. But hey, looking at what he's left behind in those short years from 72 to 1980, it is a very solid catalogue with a lot of great albums and only a few that are a little bit below par. Honestly, even the worst of them is worth hearing at least once. And you can make up your own mind. This is only my opinion. You might feel differently. So if you, for example, think that Portrait Gallery deserves to be held up high and maybe Dance Band on the Titanic should have sunk, let me know. Generally, just let me know your opinions on all things Harry and how you'd rank the albums and what you think of my list and anything else you fancy saying, really. Meanwhile, if you want to find out the 4 songs that I heard from Verities and Balderdash last year when I was celebrating its 50th anniversary, well, you can head probably one side of my head or above my head, somewhere. It'll be obvious. Otherwise, just hit that pretty purple logo and subscribe to the channel for all sorts of other interesting music content. And I will just say thanks for watching and bye for now, but not for long.
It's the end, but the moment has been prepared for.